Okay, so what I'm using now is the non-sanded grout. Okay, and it's the nutmeg color. Normally you would mix this as a consistency of a very watery consistency, not quite this thick. However, my dad was working on this and he made these a little too deep, not as deep as it could have been, but too deep for what I wanted. So now I'm gonna fill in those. So if you make yours too deep, you'll just make some thicker grout. Go ahead and pour it on there, just like that, just a little bit. Okay, get yourself an old card. And then you just wanna kind of fill in those holes by just rubbing it on a lot like you would if you were doing tile. And make sure you're putting some pressure on it so you're pulling it off the top. All you're gonna do. You're just gonna work that in all of the holes and keep pulling it back away until you get everything covered. You can kind of go in an opposite direction, just like that, just to make sure you're filling in all the gaps. Now, if you're doing it and you are only doing it very lightly when you're doing the melting process, or if you're just using the pencil technique, then you don't need to make the grout thick. You just need to do it thin, like watery thin, just to kind of get a little bit of the sand to stick to the surface. Or not the sand, but the grout itself, which feels like sand when you're putting it on here. And that's it. That's all you got to do. Okay, so once you have the whole board covered for the back wall, you're going to have to fill in here. Now these aren't obviously as deep, and this would be how you would do it if you just did the pencil mark or if you did the regular way that I showed you the first time around. Okay, you're going to mix it, see how runny this is, and then you see how thick this is. This is like a mud thickness. That's what we use to fill in the extra gaps that my dad created. Now, this is like a water, pretty much. You're just gonna paint this in. Just like that. Okay, now the styrofoam will absorb the leftover liquid, so you don't have to worry about if you make it a little too runny. And then the air will also dry out the remaining part. It'll just take longer to dry. But basically you want a nice runny mixture so that you can get in the grooves of all the little spots, and you can also get that like rocky feel to the texture. And that's all you're gonna do. Continue this process on all of them. And then you should be pretty much set to start painting once it dries. And you may have to go over it one more time if you miss something, but for the most part, I think one coat should do it if you had done it this way. Originally I said you'd need to do 3 because that's what I did with the lizard cage, but I don't think you'll need 3 with this. It seems to be working out pretty good with just the first coat, so I think one time over would be great, unless you miss spots where you have to go back in and get in those crevices. And then there it is. I'm kind of like twirling the brush. And this is a very cheap brush. You don't want to use anything expensive because the grout will get in it and you'll end up having to throw the brush away. I think I paid like 79 cents or something like this. Alright, now wait for the grout to dry, and if you see any white spots on your white foam or purple spots on your purple foam, then you'll need to go over it again. Okay, so the last time I showed you how to fill in the deeper grout lines with the actual, or the deeper lines with grout. Now we need to redefine all these lines. I mean, I guess you could leave it like that if you want, but I want mine to have a little bit more depth to them. So now we're going to work on the definition of each one. I'm trying to get to where you can see it. Okay, so you see how that looks like that, and then you go over to this area and it looks more like this, which is probably okay if you want, but I prefer this because I think this looks more realistic. So you can do whatever you want. Now, if you did not use the hot iron or the soldering iron to make the grout lines, then you don't need to do this process at all. However, it's very easy to do if you do go too deep like my dad did. You just let the grout dry, and then you take a little wooden stick or skewer and you just kind of scratch at the lines just like this. And you just kind of re-follow the line and then define each brick individually. And I mean, and this actually gives each little brick a little bit more detail than what it actually does with leaving it with just painting it without doing any grout. Okay, now I just tap it off, and then there's the area that we just did. Okay, keep following for more DIY and see how this project turns out.